If you want to learn how to nail every single interview you walk into, I'm not just talking about doing okay, I'm talking about really walking in and completely wowing your interviewer. This video is for you. And every time I get offered an interview, I always end up getting the job. And this is no accident. It's because interviewing is simply a skill. Everyone says that the market sucks and nobody's hiring. But what if the problem isn't because the market is bad, but what if the true problem is because you're not fully utilizing the full 45 minutes in your interview to be your best? Because the truth is, 45 minutes is not enough time to impress someone, which means that every single minute that goes by counts. You do not need to be the smartest person in the room. You don't even need to be perfect, and it is even okay to stumble on your words, especially when you're nervous. You want to make sure that your interviewer sees you as someone who is likable and someone who is competent. And that, my friend, is something that you can learn. Hi, my name is Jasma, and on this channel, we talk all about becoming the woman of your dreams and building a life that you absolutely love. In this video, I'm going to be giving you a comprehensive guide to ace your interview, walk in there and make a great impression, and land the job. And once you understand the framework and apply all the juicy tips that I'm going to share in this video, you will nail every single interview and finally land your dream job this year. Here are all the video chapters, and you can find the video chapters in the description below. And if you are somebody who is ready to do the real work, I'm not just talking about watching these videos, but actually transforming. I provide worksheets for every single one of my videos. In these worksheets, you'll find in-depth journaling prompts as well as practical exercises to help you start removing your limiting beliefs and to write out an action plan so you can start living out as your highest self today. You can access these worksheets down in the description below. Now let's dive into the video. Just so you know, I'm currently living on a farm in Bali right now, and I have some dogs, cats, chickens all around me at this moment. So if you hear chicken noises in the background, please do not mind. I'm just living it up in Bali right now. So I'm here to deliver content in Bali, and that's all that matters. The very first part is funnel progression. So how you progress from stage to stage. If you are doing a corporate job, typically there are multiple interview stages. Not all interviews are created equal, which means that every interviewer will have a different intention when they're interviewing you. So it's really important for you to understand which interviews are for what purpose and what the interviewers ultimately want to get out of in each interview. Can you believe how much interviews have evolved since the beginning of time? Back then, it only took one interview for you to land the job, but now there are multiple stages, and I'm talking 3 to 4 stages. The most recent job that I got, it took 7 interviews for me to land that job. So let's walk through the different stages that you may go through if you're going through an interview process. The first person that you'll be talking to is the recruiter, aka this person is the gatekeeper. Now, I want you to think of the gatekeeper as someone who is simply there to check boxes. The gatekeeper is there to make sure that you are a qualified enough candidate to be able to talk to the hiring manager. Recruiters are not deeply technical. They've never done the role and the job that you're applying for, so that means that they're simply there to check boxes. They have a overall surface level idea of what this candidate has and the skills they have, the kind of personality they have, but ultimately the recruiter is only there to make sure you have the preliminary skills in order to make it to the next round. A quick tip is to mirror what is said in the job description. So analyze the job description itself and then go through when you explain your past experiences or your skills that you want to use those specific keywords in your explanations. And since they are the gatekeeper, it's important to be kind to them. And it's important that you're personable, you're enthusiastic, you sound competent. So some questions that they may consider are, do you meet the baseline requirements? Can you communicate clearly? Are you aligned with the salary range? What about logistics, location, visa, start date? And are you a sane and professional person? The next stage is with the hiring manager, and this person is your potential boss. And this stage is all about answering behavioral questions. This is the part where they really get to know you and your working style. So they want to make sure that you're the type of person who takes ownership, right? If you make mistakes or if you do something wrong, Will you take ownership of the fact that you did something wrong? Are you reflective? Are you always on the journey to growing and developing your skills? What is working with you like? Do you make good judgment calls? Another thing is they want to know how you've made a difference in your past roles and how you've made a positive difference. And they also want to know how you've been able to improve existing systems, right? Because all companies want this person, this brand new person, to be able to change things for the better. The next stage is either with the hiring manager, or it could be with your team, or it could be a panel interview. And this is where you're tested on your technical ability. This is the part where they want to know that you have the right skills and competencies to do the job. So some things that they consider are, can you actually do the job? How do you think? Because some of these assignments that are given to you may not necessarily have the correct answer, but they just want to know your thought process when you're approaching this project. How do you solve problems? Can I trust this person? How independent are you? And typically when people hire, they do not want to be constantly holding your hand. They want to hire someone who is fully independent, people who can work on their own feet, people who can figure it out. It's important to have confidence, but it's also another thing to have a high ego. Because if you do approach answering the questions and talking to people as if you have a very high ego, then you're not going to be coachable and people are not going to want to working with you. So it's a fine balance between showing your competency and knowing that you have the skills and that you have the ability to make a huge impact, but at the same time, showing that you're open-minded, showing that you are someone with a growth mindset. And the very last interview is typically values or culture fit. And this interview is usually done by the VP, the director, the CEO, or it could just be a group of other people in different departments. If you've made it to this point, congratulations, you have probably wowed them and they want to hire you. Because if they didn't want to hire you, they would not go out of their way to get the VP of finance or the VP of marketing to come and speak to you. It's not technical. They want to know what kind of person you are. So questions that they might consider are, do you have high potential? What are your values? Do you represent the company well? Are you a long-term investment? Because training you takes a lot of resources and time. And they want to make sure that they're hiring someone who would be there for the long term. Because it costs more money and more resources to try you and then figure out that they don't actually want you. So they're making very careful steps and making a very careful decision to hire you. And do you fit in the culture? So now knowing the entire overview on what each of the stages look like, then let's now hop into how to prepare and do the proper research to wow your interviewer. Interviewers are not as scary as they seem. They're actually quite simple and straightforward, and you'll find that they're always asking the same types of questions. The top 10 questions are, tell me about yourself, strengths and weaknesses, why this company, your 5-year vision, why we should hire you, conflict, achievement, why did you leave, why is there a gap, and stress. So let's dive into each and every single one of them. I know you must be so overwhelmed with all the things that you need to prepare for in this interview, but just simply start with these 10 things. And once you master these 10 things, you're pretty much 90% of the way there. Don't focus on every single potential question that they might ask, but just focus on doing the best you can in answering these 10 questions. Tell me about yourself. So everyone's initial instinct is to read out their resume. That's false. You do not want to do that. My secret formula to make the best tell me about yourself story is this framework. You want to first start off with your past spark. So you want to use this opportunity to hook them in emotionally by telling and sharing your origin story. So for example, I've always been the type of person who fixes messy systems. Even when I was in university, I built a shared budgeting tracker for my residents because everyone kept arguing about expenses. What started as something small ended up being used by over 40 students. That was the first time I realized I enjoy bringing structure to chaos. The next step to the framework is your pattern. So this is a way to show a clear pattern of jobs that are related to this spark and related to this origin story, and you want to prove it with real roles. This is not the time to fit in all the random side gigs that you've done, but you only want to include the roles that are relevant to the job that you're applying for. So an example of this would be, I started my career as a staff accountant at Horizon Logistics, where I managed monthly reporting and reconciliations across 3 business units. While doing that, I noticed our reporting process was heavily manual and error-prone. I took the initiative to map the workflow and built a standardized template that reduced reconciliation time by about 25%. From there, I moved into an operations analyst role at BrightPath Tech, where I worked cross-functionally with finance, product, and customer success teams. My focus was identifying inefficiencies and redesigning processes. One project involved restructuring our client onboarding flow, which cut onboarding time from 21 days to 14 and improved client satisfaction scores. You'll also notice that in this part, I not only talk about my day-to-day tasks and my role, but I also talk about how I've made an impact in that role. And the last part to this framework is why this role. So you want to tie everything you've talked about and tie it directly to why you're the perfect fit for this role and why you want this role. An example would be, the consistent thread across all my roles have been identifying friction points and designing systems that make teams more efficient and aligned. At this stage, I am most motivated by working where I can take ownership, operate independently, and improve how processes function at scale. This role requires structured thinking, cross-functional collaboration, and measurable execution, which is where I've consistently delivered the strongest results. If you follow this framework, it's going to be so much more captivating and interesting for your interviewer because you're not just listing out random things that you've done, you're actually implementing and talking about the story about why it is that you'd be the perfect person for this role. The next thing is talking about your strengths and weaknesses. So strengths, pretty easy, right? We know how to talk about our strengths. But when it comes to weaknesses, people tell you, you shouldn't inflate your weakness. You should say, oh, I work too hard, or I'm too much of a perfectionist. You don't want to do that because weaknesses is where the hiring manager is really paying attention to what kind of person you are. The first thing the hiring manager is listening to is your ability to be self-aware. Are you actually aware of your shortcomings? Are you going to be able to take full ownership of your mistakes? And the second thing is that the hiring manager wants to know how you are already taking steps to fixing and improving yourself. Everyone has flaws. Your hiring manager wants to see the human in you and how you are currently improving your life. So share your process and how you're already taking action to fix and improve that shortcoming. This shows that you have a growth mindset and you're always working to become a better version of yourself. The next thing that you want to make sure you're ready for is why this company. You want to do research and know the ins and outs of this company. So I would first go through the company website and research what the company values are, what their mission is, and what is truly important to them in their culture. Then the next place that I would look is on the news. Were there any recent acquisitions? Were there any recent big news that I should pay attention to, or even big impacts that they've made? If you see a negative piece of news, you can also use that to your advantage to show that you have the skills to be able to tackle that weak point. The next place you want to look is LinkedIn. So you want to use LinkedIn to look up the potential team members that you'll be working with, your recruiter, your hiring manager, and just know what their experience has been like, maybe even how long they've worked at the company for, what school they went to, what their passions and interests are, and using this as a way to really understand who your interviewer is, because interviewers actually appreciate you looking them up. The next thing that you want to prepare for is your 5-year vision. And I know if you do not want to be at that company for 5 years, maybe you have other dreams you want to achieve, you don't want your interviewer to know that. And in fact, you want your interviewer to know that you're there for the long term. So start strategizing what the 5-year plan would look like with this role. And when you're asked that question, that you're able to share how you want to grow with the company. The fifth thing is, why should they hire you? This is where you want to translate your experiences into real needs that they're looking for. Because if they're hiring and they chose you, they're not doing you a favor. You're supposed to be doing them a favor, which means that you have to understand what kind of problems they're facing and how you are the knight in shining armor that's going to help them and save them. So know the gaps and the challenges that the company is facing and what your hiring manager is facing and what this role is made to do. And you might even be thinking, Jazz, this is an entry-level role. How am I supposed to be able to fill a gap when I have no experience? It does not matter. The fact that you're a human being and you have value to give, you need to start recognizing that. Even if you're applying for an entry-level job, you still have value and unique value to give. So don't underestimate yourself just because you don't have any experiences. You have to sit down with yourself and really evaluate what those challenges are and identify how you can fill those gaps. The next thing is conflict. So how you deal with conflict. Now, this is especially for anyone who is working a role that requires a lot of people, right? A big team, and they want to make sure that you're a mature enough person and you know how to handle conflict. But at the same time, you're also someone who is reflective, right? Even if you did make a mistake, you're able to take ownership. The next thing is a list of your achievements. So this is where you really want to strategize and think about how you've made a positive impact in your past roles. How are you a go-getter and how have you been innovative and when have you gone the extra mile to help the company improve? The next question that they'll ask you is, why are you leaving? Why are you leaving your existing job and why are you interested in going to this job instead? Maybe realistic reasons why you're leaving your existing job is because you hate your manager, you hate your coworkers. Do not focus on the negatives of this job, but think about the potential of a new job. And you do not want to use blaming language because it shows that you're the type of person that feels ill feelings towards other people. And you do not want to gossip or talk smack about past managers, about past coworkers. You want to make sure that you keep the language positive. So I would focus and say things like, I'm really looking to pivot because I feel that my skills are better matched in this role. Another thing that you could say is that you don't feel challenged or fulfilled in your current role and you're ready to take the next step forward and you want to pivot to a new job. Find positive outcomes that you can explain to your interviewer as to why you are leaving your existing job. The next thing is, why is there a gap? If you have been searching for a job for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years and you've been unemployed for 6 years, you do not want to tell the recruiter that. It's important that you frame yourself and make yourself sound like an asset. So you can say that you've been using this time to do self-exploration. You've been wanting to travel the world for years and you've been able to accomplish it. Or you spent this time to build on your skills. So you worked on several courses and you really developed and used this time to develop your skills. Or you can say that you've been running and building your own business. Or say that you are a mother. You would say that you've been spending this time with your child and raising your child. You want to make sure that the way that you're sharing this gap is that you've been using your time in a very productive manner to improving yourself, to pursuing your dreams, doing things that you've always wanted to do, and not just waiting around for life to happen. The next thing is stress. How you deal with stress, how you deal with high stress environments. Do you succumb to it? Or do you become your best self when you're in moments of stress? The next part, we'll be talking about body language, vocal tone, and setup that bumps up your success by 65%. Do not underestimate this step because the tips that I'm going to share in this section are so powerful, it makes a great first impression. The very first thing that you want to be aware of is to wear professional attire. So it does not matter if this company is at a local startup or if it's even at Starbucks. The fact is, you want to be overdressed rather than underdressed. Iron out your pants, clean your shoes, run a lint roller through your clothes. Clean your hair, run a comb through your hair. If you're a woman, I highly recommend you do a sleek back ponytail and kind of gel it down. I think it's just a really great, really luxurious, and very taken seriously look. It just shows that you have your stuff together. And you want to make sure you keep it modest. You want to be hired for your skills, your talent, and your personality. You want to wear clothes that feel comfortable to you, and you also want to keep it modest. So you want to make sure it's covering all the right places, but you feel comfortable enough to still fully be yourself. The second step is for those who are going through Zoom or online interviews. So if you're going through an online interview, you want to think of yourself as a content creator and you want to make sure that you have the best lighting for yourself. Get your lighting right, and if that means that you need to get the right equipment to do so, then so be it. Say that you live in a very dark room and you don't have the proper lighting, invest in the proper equipment. I also recommend wearing wired headphones when you're going through interviews so people are able to hear you clearly. I've had horrible experiences with AirPods, and I know that the AirPod quality, sometimes it goes in and out and sometimes it gets really glitchy, so you want to make sure you're using wired headphones. The third tip is it's okay to be nervous and it's okay to stutter. So I actually believe that being nervous is a vital part to success in an interview. And the reason why is because it really shows that you care. I've been an interviewer before, and I've interviewed people who literally just kind of laid back, were not nervous at all, and it seemed like they didn't care enough about the job or the interview. Being nervous is not only okay, but it's actually recommended because the interviewer, seeing that you're quite nervous, the interviewer is actually rooting for your success. But of course, do not vocalize that you're nervous. You do not want to do that. So being nervous for your interview can show the interviewer that you actually care to do well in this interview. When you are nervous, you are more likely to stutter. And I'm here to deliver great news because stuttering is actually okay. Stop expecting yourself to be perfect and stop paying attention to the amount of times that you stuttered in the interview, because the more you focus on the amount of times that you stutter, the less likely you're going to focus on actually building a genuine connection with the person you're interviewing with. Stuttering is okay because stuttering shows that you're human, and also the best speakers in the world, they still stutter too. For example, Sam Harris, being a thought leader, being a world-class debater, even he stutters when he debates. The more you focus on not stuttering, the more you disconnect from the interviewer, which is the last thing you want to do. If you are dealing with that nervous feeling before an interview, I highly recommend checking out EFT tapping, as well as meditation, or doing some sort of dance routine to your favorite artist. So back then, I really loved listening to Cardi B. Or you can even try this prayer. God, I place this moment in your hands. I release the need to impress, prove, or perform. Let me speak from truth, clarity, and calm. Let the right words come through me effortlessly. If this opportunity is aligned, let it unfold with ease. If it is not, help me trust that something better is being prepared for me. I choose peace over fear. I remember that my worth is not decided here. I walk in supported, guided, and protected. Thank you for going before me and making the path clear. Amen. This prayer had helped me so much because you need to remind yourself that no matter what happens, no matter how you perform, your worth is not determined in the results of the interview, right? If you get the job or if you don't, your worth is still innate. Your worth is still priceless. So no amount of job or rejections can define your worth. So please, please, please keep that in mind. The next tip is to use a lower vocal tone range. And I recommend this because when you're interviewing, when you're nervous, you're going to be speaking a lot faster than usual. But when you use a lower vocal tone, not only are you going to be able to slow down, you're also going to be able to think through your answers. You're going to be able to think while you speak, and you're also taken more seriously. When you speak with a lower tone, you do come off as someone who is assertive, someone who has leadership skills. If you talk with a really high voice, you'll find that you'll start talking really, really fast, and you won't be able to follow your thoughts with your words, and then you're going to start stuttering. So slow down, use a lower vocal tone range. Even if you don't speak at this range, start practicing because it's going to really help you ground yourself. The next thing is body language. So you want to make sure that you're sitting in a tall, straight spine and your shoulders back. You want to make sure that you look confident and competent. And make sure to use hand gestures. So especially if you're in an online interview, you want to make sure your hands are visible. Hand gestures make you know what you're talking about, but also it makes you seem more welcoming and warm. But if you compare it to having my hands behind my back or not being able to see my hands, there's a part of your subconscious that's a little bit confused, right? There's like a little bit of mystery to it, and you don't seem like you really want to talk to that person. But if you simply engage your hands, the whole energy changes. Keep your hand movements below your shoulders. Don't go crazy and use crazy hand gestures. Just keep it here. And make sure to keep it moderate, right? Not too much all the time, just moderate. The next part is let's run through how to make a great first impression in the first 5 minutes of your call, because first impression gets determined in the first 5 minutes of your interview. The first thing is to be there 5 to 10 minutes early. And even if you're in the waiting room and you're waiting for 5 to 10 minutes, or even if you're in the Zoom waiting room, make sure that you show up to your interviews early, because on time is still late. You want to make sure that the interviewer knows that you care about this interview and that you're a dependable person. So Zoom meeting or in person, make sure you show up early. The next thing is when you're answering the how are you question, you want to make sure you answer it with intention. Never just say, I'm fine, because this is your opportunity to show your interviewer what your personality truly is and what you do outside of work. Because the goal is to be likable, and to be likable, you also need to show the different layers of you. So instead of saying, I'm good, how are you? You can say, I actually just watched the game last night and I'm recovering from that ending. That immediately separates you from every single candidate because number one, you're breaking down the walls of the interviewer. You want to brand yourself as someone different. You don't want to be any other candidate because every other candidate is only going to try to impress the interviewer with their skills, with their experiences, but you are different because you have real passions, you have real talents. You are someone who is so multidimensional and you want to show the human side of yourself to your interviewer. And this may even be an opportunity for the interviewer to relate to you. So what if the interviewer is also a Seahawks fan? And that in itself is already an icebreaker, that you guys already have the same passion, you guys already have the same interests, and that itself makes you more likable. And while every candidate is going to seem the same, you're different because you're the Seahawks girl, you're the girl who traveled around the world, you're the girl who started a podcast, you're the girl that hiked up Mount Kilimanjaro. You have real differentiating factors that make you different and make you human. During the 45 minutes with your interviewer, you need to make sure that you're presenting yourself as a brand. You're not just any other candidate, you are someone different, even if it means sharing your passions and interests outside of the role. The question as simple as how are you can be a really great way to show your interviewer that you have hobbies and interests outside of work. The next part is how top candidates answer behavioral questions. The candidates that always nail the interview and always get the job, they understand that they need to prepare for the interview in order to ace it. You need to make sure that you have certainty over the questions that they're going to ask you, which means that you need to be over-prepared. If it takes you 1 hour to prepare for your interview, that's great. But most people aren't like that. And in fact, it takes me weeks to prepare for an interview. I'm aware that I'm not good at improv. So if I go into the interview barely prepared, I am not going to know what to say because I'm just going to feel very nervous. I need to work with that nervousness and help me prepare to make sure that I'm fully set up for success for the interview. First thing is to create an experiences toolbox. So download my worksheet down below and I have a list of all the potential behavioral questions that you might get asked. And as you go through each question, I just want you to quickly highlight what kind of story or what kind of experience you can talk about. You do not need to create a new story or new experience, but in fact, you'll find that certain questions ask for the same experience. So this is where you want to collect those overlapping stories, and this is where you're going to come up with your experience toolbox. You'll find that there are certain questions and experience that overlap one another. And going into your interview with between 5 to 10 of these experiences is just enough for you to ace the interview. The second thing to note is to use the STAR-L method, not the STAR method. So S stands for situation, T stands for task, A stands for action, R stands for result, and L stands for lesson. Having that lesson piece shows that you are someone with the growth mindset and someone who is constantly reflecting. So for example, if you're given a question, tell me a time where you've handled conflict in a team. How you can set up your answer is this. So let's first start off with your situation. In my last role, I was working on a project with 2 teammates to launch a new internal system. We had a tight deadline, and about halfway through, we realized that we were not aligned on how the system should function. This is your short setup. And then the next piece is your task. So this is your own clear responsibility. So as the project lead, it was my responsibility to make sure we stayed on track and didn't miss the deadline, even even though there was tension between team members. The next part is action. So what you ended up doing. Instead of letting the disagreement grow, I set up a short meeting with just the three of us. I asked each person to clearly explain their perspective and what outcome they were trying to protect. I wrote the key points on a shared document so everyone could see them. Then I helped us focus on the main goal of the project, not just our individual opinions. We agreed on a version that combined the strongest parts of both ideas. After that, I followed up with a clear action plan and assigned next steps with deadlines. You're showing concrete ideas and how you were able to take control of the situation. So next part is the result. So this is the measurable outcome. This is the part where you want to make sure that you show that you've made an impact. We delivered the system on time, and after launch, it reduced processing time for the team by 20%. More importantly, the relationship between the team members improved, and we were able to work more smoothly on future projects. Lastly, the lesson. So what you learned. What I learned is that conflict can be a beneficial thing because it's simply two people caring about different risks. If you slow down, listen, and bring the focus back to the shared goal, you can turn conflict into better results instead of delays. Now, I want you to go through your experiences toolbox, and I want you to go through those 5 to 10 experiences and write down your own STAR L method response. Now, I know what you must be thinking. Jazz, I have 10 stories and I need to write STAR L methods for all 10 stories. And yes, you do, but there is an easier way to do this, and I love using ChatGPT. So I go into ChatGPT and I just ramble about the story, right? I don't need to organize it. I'm just rambling about the story, what impacts I've made, what the situation was. Like, it doesn't even have to be coherent, right? Just use ChatGPT as a way to brainstorm and then say, okay, now that you have all the details, ChatGPT, now I want you to organize it to a STAR L method response. And I want you to re-explain it back to me as if you're explaining it to a 9th grader. Now, this is a really important tool because if you don't say that line, ChatGPT is only going to spit back to you in very technical terms, and you're probably going to memorize the response word by word, and that is not what I want you to do. So when you tell ChatGPT to re-explain it back to you as if you're explaining it to a 9th grader, you're creating a more digestible way for you to understand that response, write your own notes, and then re-explain it again in your own way. You do not need to have the perfect answer, and you do not need to memorize what ChatGPT spits out at you. You want to explain the situation clearly in a way that you understand it and also in a way that the interviewer understands it. Your responses should be no longer than 90 seconds to 2 minutes, because anything longer than that is you rambling. And make sure that you practice your responses bit by bit. So if you know that you have 2 weeks to prepare for your interview, I highly recommend that you spend just 30 minutes going through each experience and practicing your STAR L method and practicing how you would explain that situation to the interviewer. The best time to practice is right in the evening because you're able to retain that information better. The third thing is to be likable. You don't want to go in sounding like an AI robot, but you want to show your true personality. So if you're naturally funny, make sure you spit a few jokes here and there. If you're someone who is deep, show that. Don't be afraid to be yourself, because being your authentic self will actually give you an edge. The very last part is how to wrap up and exit your interview the right way. So if your interviewer asks you about questions, this is your opportunity to really ask about what the culture is like. You really want to understand it so you yourself know that you'll enjoy the job. But if you don't have questions, I highly recommend that you ask the following 3 questions. The first question is, are there any assumptions I can clear up about my resume that you'd like me to address? I haven't heard anyone talk about this question, but I think it is so incredibly important because someone could look at your resume and see that you've worked somewhere for 3 months. Maybe you had a real valid reason as to why you ended that term early. Or if you had a really big gap, this is your opportunity to share why this gap was so big. Life sometimes does get in the way, and if you do not properly lay down the facts and explain it clearly, your interviewer is going to make assumptions about what you did. And typically, these assumptions are not good. So it's better that you clear the air now than later. The second question you can ask is, what are your goals and expectations for me in the first 90 days? This shows that you are a go-getter and that you care about succeeding in this role. The last question that I would ask is, how have you grown personally and professionally within this company or within this role? I love this question because I am am someone who truly values growth. And if you ask a question like that, it shows that you care about your growth. You care about your own personal development. The second thing to note is that if your interviewer is asking you if you're interviewing anywhere else, say that you are, even if you're not. You don't need to name which companies, but just say that there are a couple conversations going on right now. This also shows social proof that there are people out there seeking you and having real conversations and interviews with you because they're interested in you. And it also brings up this perceived demand because they're going to want to go through interviews faster and they're going to want to secure you. The last thing to note is to send a personalized thank you message. Your interviewer took out time in their busy day to speak to you, to answer your questions, so it's important that you send a thank you note. And don't just ask ChatGPT and go like, just write me a thank you note. You want to make sure you personalize it. You can write about things that you guys talked about, even if they're not work related. And this is an opportunity to share that you've been actively listening and that you cared about what they had to say. They will really appreciate you going out of your way to send a thank you message because not everyone does that. And if it comes down to either you or another candidate, and you went out of your way to send thank you messages to everybody, that could be enough to tip the scales over in your favor. So don't neglect the small details. We have finally reached the end of this video. If you are still here, thank you so much. I hope that this video really provided the value that you've been looking for. I would love to know in the comments down below, what is your dream job that you are intending on manifesting this year? And if you want to implement everything that I've taught in this video, then check out my worksheets down below. And if you are on the journey of becoming the woman of your dreams and building a life that you absolutely love, then check out my channel because I make a ton of videos about self-worth, self-development, relationships, career, literally all things high-value women energy. And if you liked this video, I highly recommend that you check out this video over here. This video will show you how to become more eloquent, and especially when you're going into an interview, you want to make sure you sound eloquent and articulate. I love and appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!